You're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We're here on the unceded traditional territory of the Salish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. This is Bernadine Fox, here with my co-host for the week, Dawn Wright, bringing you Both Sides Now. Welcome to our show. I'm Bernadine Fox.
And I'm Dawn Wright, co-host. Thank you for joining us today.
And today we're talking with my friend Anthony Stonechild, who I met when my child, Ace Crowchild, was performing at Metro Theatre's Panto Jack and the Beanstalk. Anthony played the giant, walked around atop huge stilts, and used his belting lower octaves to scare us all into barrels of laughter. In what is now known as the 60s scoop, 20,000 Indigenous children were stolen from their families and put into foster homes or adopted out to primarily white middle-class families. Interestingly, this theft of children started as the residential schools began to phase out, and although it would take another several decades to complete the residential schools ending. Children were taken from First Nation homes under the mistaken belief that this would assimilate Indigenous people into white culture. Growing up, some were never even told they were Indigenous. For some, their culture and origins were lost forever. The horror and all that is entailed under the notion of assimilating a whole group of people is shocking and points to a larger social wrong with long-reaching implications. But today, in this hour, we're going to focus our attention down to the micro level, the story of one boy who grew into one man who was kept from his immediate family for over 50 years solely because he was Indigenous. Thank you for coming, Anthony, and welcome to our little show.
Thank you for having me, and I'm glad to be here.
That's good. I'm really happy about doing this story, not because it makes me happy, but I think it's a really important story to tell. So I'm going to start off right away and ask you the hard question.
Okay.
I want you to tell us or describe for us your memory of your mom.
My memories of my mom. My original mother, I was taken away from the family at about the age of 4. The things that I do remember of her, I have a solid foundation of understanding that love belongs in my life because she was a very loving person. My favorite memory of her, she used to bake bread. This I remember about her. She used to bake bread, and I think she was selling it in the neighborhood or whatever, but she'd always have multiple tins of bread out. And us kids, when it was coming out of the oven, we'd smell it down the street, and we'd be all gathered up at the back door. You know, they had these little half doors where the top swung open, and she'd have locked the bottom one there. We'd all be peering over it.
And you were how old?
4. Under 4.
Under 4.
4 or under.
Okay. So you really had to get on your tippy toes.
Yeah, exactly.
To reach that.
And she would go through the tins, empty them out, and then line them up on the cooling rack and just feel them to make sure that they were cooling down enough. And when she felt that one of them was cool enough, she'd pick it up and toss it out to us. And then us boys would just rip into it, and everybody walks away with a little piece of fresh baked heaven.
Oh, that's cool.
That's my favorite memory of her.
Mm-hmm. And the smell of baking bread is
this memory has all of those wonderful things about it.
Right.
It brings to mind like summer and sunshine and warm bread and just the taste, the smell, everything.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, the love of your mother.
Yeah.
She's a very loving person.
Yeah.
Do you recall the day they came and took you away?
Not in clear sense. I do have vivid images from it that come to mind when I think about it. I do remember being pulled out of my mother's arms at one point by a female RCMP officer. Now, here's the thing about memory. I'm not sure if this is something I've constructed in my mind, but it is something that does come to me whenever I think about this. I recall being pulled out of my mother's arms by a female RCMP officer. I remember howling like mad. And I also remember in the back of the car as we're driving away, just pressing against the window, watching my mom disappear in the background. And she's devastated. She's crying. She's... Yeah.
Do you remember your dad?
Brief flashes, but I mean, typical of a lot of dads. I think he worked, and so us kids were with the mom all day, and when he came home, it was time. The more important time was for him and mom, and so us kids didn't. I don't think we had a lot of interaction with our father, so I don't have a lot of memories from him. I can tell you a funny little anecdote. They came home one day and sent the babysitter away, and Mom and Dad were in the middle of an argument. I don't know what it was about, but finally Mom turns to me, and remember, I'm all of about 3 or 4 years old. I'm knee-high to a short man. And she says to me, "Oh, kick him." So I wind up all 2'4" of me and kick him in the shins as hard as I can. The things that I remember about that is one of my older brothers told me if they had tried something like that, they'd be pasted on the wall. Right. But he was just laughing at me. So I think they thought I was kind of the favorite child.
Oh.
You mentioned siblings. How many, and were they also scooped at the same time?
That's not a direct answer. There were 10 of us boys. All totaled. 4 of us have survived. There we are. The eldest, Blair, was in fact the eldest of us. He's about 14 years older than I am. And the other 3 of us, I'm the eldest of those 3, and we came in fairly quick succession. 1 year, 1 year, 1 year.
What do you remember of your brothers, besides the scrambling for bread? And
Well, we kind of came in 2 different lots because there were the older brothers, the Blair and Richard and I'm sorry, I'm having trouble remembering all of the names. It's kind of
how many brothers do you have?
9.
Yes. Okay.
It's kind of new to me to know who all of these people are, and they've passed away. Right. Chris was the one who was closest to me. He was just a couple of years older than me, and he and I were kind of paired off together more often than not. He was sort of my protector and my guide and my tormentor, and I was his pain in the neck.
So, but you remember being on the reserve?
Yes, I do.
You lived on a reserve, I take it?
Well,
which reserve
for at
was
least
it?
a part of the time, I have memories from a reserve. I'm not sure what the entire chronology is.
Okay.
I do believe that we did move into the city. That would be Regina at some point, but and somewhere along the way, I was moved up to Saskatoon. But I do have memories from reserve. For example, I remember the sun dances. I remember a powwow. I remember like running across the fields. I remember the smell of sage grass. And, all of these memories come with sensory inputs that are more clear than the actual memory themselves.
And which reserve is this?
I came from a reserve called Peepeekisis, which is in the Qu'Appelle Valley, in or near the Qu'Appelle Valley.
And that's eastern Saskatchewan? Or
Southeastern Saskatchewan. It's near the Manitoba border.
Right.
It's beautiful. I just went back there this last month, and it really is a beautiful, beautiful area of Saskatchewan. Everywhere else in Saskatchewan just seems endless and flat until you get to the north, and then it's endless and flat with trees.
Yes. Or you hit the Cypress Hills if you're lucky, and you sort of go down into some
Cypress
kind of,
Hills is about where I was.
Yes.
So all of those hills and valleys and that beautiful topography that I don't know, a glacier carved out or something. It's gorgeous.
It is
there.
gorgeous. So you lived on the reserve at one point. When the RCMP came to get you, were you living on the reserve or were you living in town?
I was told that there had been a small, like some kind of an accident in the house, and we were being looked after by like an elder sister and her somebody. Mum wasn't there, I was told. But at that time, any interaction with either police, fire, ambulance, the social services network came along with it and would take the children. It would be kind of, I don't really recall the incident, but that's the point where we were taken.
So, but you just said that your mum wasn't there. So,
well, I'm
but
told
you have
that.
a memory of your mum being
Okay,
there when
I'm
you...
told that. But
I
but I
know,
also
just-
remember that
it's okay that
my older brother made us, we ran away from our first foster home at about the age of 4. So
Wow.
that could be where that memory
Right.
of being taken
Right.
out of my mother's arms comes from.
You're 4. You're not.
Yeah,
you're not
I'm-
expected to know all the chronology
Yeah,
and everything.
exactly,
Your memories are just fine. So you were told at some point that you were taken because you weren't being taken care of properly. Do you recall that? Do you recall being
No, that was
neglected or needing stuff or being
No.
afraid or being
no. As a matter of fact, I
unloved?
remember feeling safe.
right?
Things like my older brothers are the ones who taught me how to read. I would sit on their laps while they were doing homework, and they'd be reading their textbooks for me. So I walked into grade 1 as first day of kindergarten, fully capable of reading.
Right.
And that was my refuge in foster care as well. I'd go find the library or the comic books and that the brothers had in whatever family I was in. And I'd spend all my time just sort of escaping from the family by escaping into books. So when I got to first day of school, they discovered that I was well past kindergarten level as it was. My brothers had spent all that time
Right.
making sure that I understood their own textbooks.
Wow, that's
So
cool.
they progressed me up a level fairly quickly.
That's great. We're just going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
When I was young on the reservation, spent my time out in God's creation. The river was our life and our playground. Spent my time roaming all around.
Join us every Monday from 2:30 to 4 p.m. for She Boom. Open your ears to the sound of the latest and greatest women in music. Our show focuses entirely on female artists, from a local to global perspective. Every Monday from 2:30 to 4 p.m., tune in to She Boom on CFRO 100.5 FM, Co-op Radio.
You're listening to Both Sides Now on Vancouver Co-op Radio 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and
I'm your co-host, Don Wright. Thank
And-
you for joining us.
we're here with Anthony Stonechild, a man who was taken from his family during the 60s scoop and sent into foster care system.
So we heard a description of what that whole process was all about. What is that like for you to sort of hear that summarized?
To hear the well, I've been told several things about this. This was a systematic thing. As an adult looking back at it, I'm appalled at the way we were treated. But as a child, I mean, you take these things as kind of the way life is. You don't have a framework to put it together. So the emotions going through it are very different now than what I experienced as a child. As a child, it was terrifying. I was being taken from a home and a family and a world that I knew, that I loved, and placed into constantly repeating uncertainty.
Right.
Were you taken with your brother at the same time, or were you reunited in a foster home after the fact?
Well, we were changed around into several different families, but yes, Chris and I were often paired together. So we went, first of all, to a family, maybe a couple of families in quick succession together. And because we ran away together, I think we were then separated. I ended up in another foster home with another brother named Nicky. He was in those photos.
We will put some of these photos up for folks.
And I'm not sure how long we stayed in any of those families. Eventually, I was moved off and separated out. I know that a couple of my other brothers were placed together, but I don't know that there was any effort to put the five of us together.
How many foster homes do you think you were in before you went to the family that you stayed with for until
This
you
is
were
an
an adult?
estimate between 8 and 10.
8 and 10.
And
how
then
old
I
were
was
you?
adopted at the age of 9.5. Well, I came to the family that adopted me at the age of 9.5.
So between
They
four-
finally adopted me at 10.
So between 4 and 10, that's 6 years, you were in 8 to 9. Did I hear that
8
right?
to 10.
8 to 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know one of those was at least over a year because they were planning to adopt me, but decided not to for some reason.
Do you realize that one of the things that was true about the foster care system back then was this belief that they shouldn't allow children to bond with their foster families, and so if they saw you bonding and stuff, that would be the time that they would remove you and take you to another home, which now that looking back, they realize what incredible damage they did to people.
Oh, yeah.
Small
my
children,
own,
not allowing them to bond.
Yeah, my own experience would bear that out. I think I was moved about every 3 months at first until I came to a family. The family that was going to adopt me was actually cousins to the family that had adopted me just prior. And they decided that they wanted to take me in. And they had me for about a year, just over a year. We lived in a little acreage outside of Saskatoon called Clavette. And I'm not entirely certain why they finally decided not to adopt me, but yeah, at the age of 9, I was placed back in the foster care system. But before that, yeah, I call it the kaleidoscope life. You shut your eyes and you ignore everything for a little while, and then you open it and the whole world is different. You've got a new mother, a new father, new siblings, you're going to a new school, you're in a new neighborhood, there is nothing the same, and yet all of the forms the forms of how you deal with it have to remain fairly consistent. This woman expects you to call her mom, this man expects you to call him dad. You're expected to treat these strange kids as your brothers and sisters.
And yet you're expected never to bond with them as a family.
Yeah.
To begin with, it's
you're
very
the
bizarre.
outsider looking in. I remember, like, a lot of them were Catholic or church-going people, and so every Sunday we'd be going to a church, and everybody else would be going up and taking communion with the congregation, but I was not allowed to, so I had to sit in the pews while everybody filed around me and filed past me, and then took their communion and filed back in. It was a real sense of isolation. Even their rituals, I couldn't, if I wanted to, I was not allowed to participate in them.
When you say rituals, you mean the stuff in church? Or?
Yeah, the church and those things that stitch a community together.
Exactly.
I was on the outside looking in.
So there are things that happen within a family that are kind of similar in terms of their sort of quirks and traditions that they do. Were you included in those as well, or?
I learned very quickly to just kind of watch to see how each family comported myself, and that was a hard lesson to learn. I think I went from one family where they had a number of kids, like 4 or 5 maybe, and dinner time was kind of a gentle chaos. Food was put down on the table. We all grabbed a platter, served ourselves, and passed things around, and it worked. In the next family I went to, there was only one other child in that family, and I acted in the same way. As soon as food was put down, I grabbed some, put some on my plate, put it down, had a spoon coming back for a second to my plate, and realized that they were praying.
Oh, dear.
So I was actually sent away without dinner in that evening, but I was able to explain to the new mother at that point that, look, it wasn't that I wanted to insult them, it wasn't that I disrespect their faith or religion or anything. Those weren't my words, of course, but that I didn't know how things were supposed to be in this family, because that's the way things were in the last family, and I was just acting the way they expected me to act.
Did she hear you?
Well, she snuck food up to me.
Oh, well, that was
which was a nice thing.
That's nice.
But yeah, it taught me to not move until I see somebody else move before me, to watch what the mores are and to learn by looking.
You hear a lot of stories about foster care. I mean, some are just horror stories, and some kids are lucky enough to get into a nurturing home. What kind of experience did you have, having gone through 8 different homes?
I'd say it runs a gamut. I do recall begging the social workers to allow me to stay with at least one family, because they were so kind, so gentle with me, and so understanding, nurturing.
Why were you moved then?
But I was moved away from that one in the usual 3 months in, 3 months out kind of experience. The reason I begged so hard to stay with them is because in other families I've had experiences like being slapped for struggling for a word in English that I know in Cree, so using the Cree and just being slapped into the wall for it. The levels of abuse went right up the gamut. I have been sexually abused. I have been, neglect. I remember going through Christmases where they essentially forgot to get me anything until, like, it's quick, buy my little plastic toy from the grocery store and wrap that for him, and it's very clear that their real children got the real presents. And
So you felt unreal.
well, unwanted.
Unwanted.
Yeah, just everywhere I went. It's something that I'm still sensitive about to this day. A lot of my friends complain that I don't take the initiative to instigate activities or to put myself out there, and I'm constantly waiting for them to invite me, because I'm very sensitive to being someplace that I'm not wanted.
Right. I think that that's probably true not just for children who were basically stolen out of First Nations homes, but a lot of kids who were in families where they were neglected and treated poorly and stuff.
Yeah, I believe that.
Am I right,
Oh,
Don?
absolutely.
You would know
I mean,
more.
those early experiences give you it's an erroneous, but it's a sense of your value and your worth. And if you're neglected, the message is you're not worth the attention.
Yeah.
And even though that's a false message, it's one that becomes deeply instilled, and it takes sometimes a lot of work.
The difficulty for me, though,
Yeah.
is and that I'd had a contrast to it that was very clear in my mind at that time. I cried myself to sleep for years because I could remember a time when I was loved.
Right.
And I knew what that felt like, and it sure didn't feel like anything I was receiving in any of these families.
Yeah.
So your mother saved you through all that time.
Well, the memory of her did, I would say.
Yeah. You're here in Vancouver. You're not in Saskatchewan. How did you get here, and what was that road like? I know you were adopted into a family.
I was adopted into a
And-
family. The father was a professor of pharmacology at University of Saskatchewan. My mother had degrees in nursing, pharmacy, and social work. She ended up working at St. Paul's Hospital in Saskatoon. On my mother's side of the family, they have relatives who live out here in Vancouver. So when the relationship between my father and me disintegrated, I decided that, and this was at about 16 about 16, I decided that living on the streets in Vancouver was a heck of a lot easier than living on the streets in Saskatoon. So shortly after I turned 17, I came out here, left Saskatoon in the middle of a blizzard, arrived here March 22nd.
Wow, big difference.
In the middle of sunshine.
Yes,
And
crocuses and
no place to
butterflies.
go, no money in my pocket, but
Right.
it's a heck of a lot easier to get by in those conditions.
Your mother had your adopted mother, had family here.
Yes, she was actually raised here. I think she
Okay.
went to, not Eric Camber, the school in Kitsilano.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But
Am I right that you did ballet at one point?
yes, I did.
Tell me about that. How did that happen?
Well, it began in Saskatoon. I was a strange child and ripe for bullying, but I found theater, and when I went to high school, they put me in a high school that had a fully functioning theater as a part of it. So I joined their drama program, much to the consternation of my father, who wanted me to be a scientist. So I joined the drama program, and as part of that, I started to explore how do I make myself more comfortable with movement on stage. So I got myself into a ballet class. Took about a year's worth of lessons from Lucia Pavlichenko in Saskatoon, ended up in the streets here in Vancouver, and my way of keeping myself alive was to sleep during the day, and then in the evenings head out to the nightclubs and dance until they close, and then I'd go and bust tables at a little all-night restaurant, and then go break into some place to sleep because I was still homeless.
Wow. We just need to take a little break here. Bad place to take a little break, but we'll be right back.
My son, when they took you away, you were so young and strong. I just couldn't wait for the day to have you back home where you belong. The only thing that kept me alive was knowing I would see you again. There was no way for me to know you'd come back. Oh man, I don't know. My son, where did you go when they took you away? My son, where did you go when they took you away? I don't recognize you anymore.
join nonprofit society Beyond the Conversation for Vancouver's second annual Walk to End Social Isolation on Saturday, September 21st. This inclusive multicultural event draws on the communities of Greater Vancouver in an effort to draw awareness to the devastating effects of social isolation in modern society. Participants will gather at the Plaza of Nations at 750 Pacific Boulevard at 9:30 a.m. At 10 a.m., participants will walk along the seawall toward Olympic Village Square by the Creekside Community Center. From 10:45 to 2 p.m., Beyond the Conversation will host speeches, group conversations, and other activities at Olympic Village Square. On Saturday, September 21st, join Beyond the Conversation for the second annual Walk to End Social Isolation.
You're listening to Both Sides Now on Vancouver Co-op Radio, 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox here with Don Wright, and we're back with Anthony Stonechild. Anthony, you were telling us about dance. How did you get into training?
How did I get into training? Well, where we left off, my relationship with my father in Saskatoon had disintegrated badly, and I ended up living on the streets here in Vancouver, and my way of coping with that was to sleep during the day, and I used to break into a few of the churches around here, and maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but
we know nothing.
And
we won't tell anyone.
I'd sleep during the day, and the evening I'd get up, I'd go to the nightclubs when they opened up, and I would just dance. I'd practice the things on the dance floor that I had learned in Lucia Pavlichenko's studio in Saskatoon. And I kept doing that for several months, and later in the evening I'd be bussing tables for a burger a night. And I did that for a while. Eventually this dance teacher who had been trained by the Kirov in Leningrad watched me one night and pulled me aside and said, "You actually have some talent. Would you like to take lessons?" And I said, "I can't afford it." And he said, "Don't worry about that. If I believe that you've got talent, I want to invest in this." So he gave me a time and a place to show up. I'd never been living in Kitsilano. It was over here someplace. So I didn't know the area very well. I managed to get my way there, though, and I stayed with those lessons for like 6 or 8 months, showing up every day, doing the work, working as hard as I can, and keeping the rest of my life pretty much the same as it was. Sleep during the day, go out dancing at night, and bus tables and late in the evening. Eventually, he introduced me to a fellow who was an editor of Montreal magazine, who was in town for the Christmas holidays for family, and we hit it off. So the plan was made to take me off to Montreal, get me in front of the people at Le Grand Ballet, audition me, and that's what we did. Le Grand Ballet took one look at me, thought, well, here's a kid who is stronger than he looks, a lot more flexible, and the dance training that Ian Robertson had given me was pretty solid. So they took me in right away. Wow. I spent about 4 years with them. It was a great time. It really kind of solidified my life, taught me a lot about discipline, the rewards of hard work, about it gave me a direction and a focus that I couldn't have gotten on my own.
I always find that story about you ending up in ballet, it's just so remarkable, and it makes me realize miracles happen even to people who feel like they're unwanted and don't really belong anywhere.
I'm just grateful at the time. I mean, this was the early 80s. Drugs were a very big thing, particularly coke and the higher-end drugs at that time were a very big thing in Vancouver, and I could have easily have fallen down a rabbit hole, but instead I chose dance.
Well, it says
How
a lot
long were
about
you with that company?
I was never in the company proper. I was just sort of in the training program. But yeah, I was with them for about 3 years. Left them, worked independently for about a year until I broke my foot.
Anthony, you've been living this story about being taken from your family and living without them for your whole life. And my entry point into your story was a day we went to the coffee shop, and I was telling Dawn this earlier, and you and my child Ace were the two First Nations folks in a panto. I can't remember if it was Jack and the Beanstalk then or Aladdin. It could have been Aladdin.
I think it was a later one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I seem to recall that this was I'd already known you.
Yes.
At this point.
Yeah. And I remember sitting there in this coffee shop. I was going to write a story about these two First Nations people in this panto, and I remember saying, so tell me about your life and give me some history. And you got to the point of saying that you had been taken at the age of 4, part of the 60s scoop, and that you really didn't know who your family was. And we were kind of ignoring Ace sitting over there and talking
Which is hard
between
to
the
do.
two.
Ace is an incredibly talented young man.
Yes, I think so, but I'm so biased, it's beyond words. Anyway, but I remember him handing you his iPad and saying, is this your family or your mom or something? He'd found an obituary, and a part of that obituary was...
It was an obituary for my brother.
Oh, was it for your brother? Okay.
For my brother, yeah. I believe it was for Christopher, who passed away in 2005. And the thing that I found really remarkable about it, first of all, how she found it, I'm not sure, because Chris didn't have the same last name as me, but Stonechild was referenced somewhere in that obituary. And and because Chris's last name it started with G. I remember that, but that's all I remember. It referenced so many details from my original family, and one of the things that was written was my name at birth, which was Joseph.
Right.
I've had my name changed several times on me. My name at birth was Joseph, and they listed me as missing.
Whereabouts unknown.
Whereabouts unknown.
I know, I remember that. It was kind of shocking to A, find your family, and B, recognize
and
they've
it
been
also
looking
and it
for
also
you.
It was one of those things that I think I needed to just sit back and process for a while, because I'd been separated from them for so long.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
you and me both. You way more than me, but even me sitting there, it was like, okay, well, I can't write this story now. I can't. I mean, it just didn't have an ending, and it seemed like we just sort of popped into the middle of something really, really dramatically huge. In the past couple months, you've been able to locate your immediate family.
More to the point, they found me.
They found you.
Yeah, I was still processing stuff.
How did that happen?
Facebook.
I love Facebook.
To be honest, because I have gone back to using my original family name. I was still in kind of the process of processing what I was feeling about all of this, because, I mean, foster families and adoptive family have put a lot of poisonous thoughts in my head about...
What kinds of poisonous thoughts? That's an important part of this.
A lot of stuff about me being Native, about the value of Native people, about I got into an argument once with a fellow who has claimed that he was being discriminated against by friends of mine, and I argued with him about that quite a bit, because I know what discrimination is, and my point to him was, look, at least you could go home and talk to your mother, and your mother would tell them that it's them who are full of crap, not you. I would go home to my parents, and they would tell me, well, it's because you're Native, and you probably are going to end up like an alcoholic on welfare, and you know.
Didn't they also tell? Weren't you also told as a child that you were with them because your family had not taken care of you? Or?
All of that.
Right.
All of these things which conflicted badly with my memory of who my family was. But basically the refrain was, look, they had to have very good reason. They wouldn't have taken you without very good reason. I now know that's a complete lie, but yeah, that's still the stuff that I was processing. So when my brother got a hold of me, because I have gone back to using the name Stonechild, which is my original name. Everybody else in the family has got names from adoptive or foster homes, or it gets complicated, which is what made it difficult for me to find them. When they contacted me, it was because of my name.
Right.
And I finally asked, Burl it was, if his mother was our mother, Irene. And he came back with, yes, and your father is John,
Right.
and your brother's name, who is still alive, and is Nick Hellawell, and he is a minister living in Regina. So, yeah, I got a hold of Nick, and Nick just flipped out, and he arranged for me to come over and spend a week in Regina with him.
Yeah, and I saw the pictures and I saw the newspaper article, and what was that like? I mean, your brother is there saying what it was like when he first saw you. He said, I knew you right away. What was it like when you saw them?
Surreal.
Surreal.
First of all, I'd been traveling since 6 o'clock. There was a layover in Calgary that I honestly can't remember because I hadn't slept the night before.
You made a Facebook post about it. I remember.
Yeah, I was. So I was feeling disheveled. I was feeling unprepared for everything, and I come down the walkway in Regina Airport, and I realize not only is Nick there, and he sent me a photo, so I recognize him. There's a camera crew there.
Really? You didn't know it was going to be there?
No.
Oh my, that might have been an important thing to.
Well, you know, it's interesting, especially because I had asked Nick before, how would you feel if I showed up with a camera crew? And his response was, well, I'm not really sure I want to be the lead on the 6 o'clock news. Of course, what happens? A camera crew shows up, and we were the lead on the 6 o'clock news.
Okay, so you've gone your whole life feeling unwanted and other, and there you are now in the company of these people.
Yeah, it's surreal because immediately there is a sense of, I know these people. I can feel that I know these people. Blair was there, the eldest brother, and Nick, of course. Nick is married now to Vivian, and he's got some lovely kids, and a few of them were there. And it was this immediate presence of a sense of family, and yet hovering parallel to that feeling was this sense of surreality, because I don't know these people. I don't know anything really about them. I've never really spoken to them. I've never seen them face to face. And their family, I know, I can feel it, I can see it. And my friends who have looked at the photos and seen the video of it have said, well, he's definitely your brother, you know. So there's all that energy, and there's this conflict inside of me that I'm trying to squelch, going, I don't know what I'm walking into here.
Right. But of course, you've been told your whole life that you were taken because
because
something
these
bad
people
had
weren't
happened.
good enough.
Yes, and so here you are walking back into it.
They were rescuing me from these people,
Right.
and yet this was a very loving, very, very open, very. Their joy at finding me was very, very genuine and quite contagious.
But they've been looking for you as well. They've been searching for you.
Yeah, they had no idea where I was.
When we chatted, you also talked about going to a powwow and that there was a ceremony. And can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I find that in such stark contrast to what people said that they were rescuing you from. So.
Oh yeah. We'll get back to that point in a minute. One of the first things Nick and Blair did, is they took me to a powwow. I'm not entirely certain where, somewhere between Coppell and Lebret, this area, and I could be wrong about the geography, but But this area that where our family has lived for like thousands of years, and he introduced me to a number of people who I have half sisters. I didn't know that until a month ago. My father had daughters by another woman, and they were introduced to me. And again, that immediate sense of, I know you, I've seen you, I've felt your energy before in my life. I remember this at a cellular level. But I not knowing anything about these people. The powwow was held right beside a little graveyard area, this pavilion that they had built. So she took me out to the grave area, and she was able to show me where my father was laid to rest, and then where other members of his family, his clan, were laid to rest. Later in the day, when things were getting started, the organizers insisted on doing a little ceremony where it's called dancing you into the community, and it's just to recognize that I'd been away from the community for so long. It had this feel of the prodigal son. You're laying out a banquet for the prodigal son. The form of it was that they had one man in full regalia on one side of me and another man in full regalia, and I so wanted to study the regalia of these people. It's beautiful.
Yes.
All the beadwork, the leathers, the feathers, it's just gorgeous, and every one of them is just completely individualistic. There no two are the same. But so I'm standing beside these fantastically dressed men, and they're walking me through the circle of the powwow. And as we're going through, members of the community are coming up to smudge themselves with me and shake my hand, and a lot of them were telling me, I'm your first cousin, I knew your mother, I babysat you, all of these people who were just absolutely thrilled to see me, welcoming me back into the community.
It's a beautiful story, very moving.
Well, it lies in stark contrast to the fact that I called up my adoptive sisters a few days before, and I asked them if they were interested in meeting my brothers, and the one of them is going through health problems and just unable to make that, and I understand that. But the other one was quite insulting to me. The attitude was, why would we want to? There was a very good reason why you were taken away from your family. They're not good people. It was poisonous, and I contrast that against this incredible outpouring of love that my real family did give me after not seeing me for 50 years.
But what you're describing is also two very consistent experiences on your part, right? That you experienced growing up in different foster homes, and in the home you finally were in, where you weren't wanted and you weren't cared for and you weren't given what you needed. And this memory of being loved by your mother and returning there to love. So I think what you're saying is that your experiences of those two things remain the same.
The adoptive family didn't love me, but somehow I've always felt that their love was very conditional.
Okay.
And I mean, one of the things that my sister tried to tell me was that I'm disgracing the family somehow.
By going back and finding your family?
I'm not really sure where her head was at.
Well, but I want to say is that you left a place that you felt loved and cared for, and you returned to a place where you felt loved and cared for.
Yeah, they went out of their way to point out just how much they have missed me. My name has been spoken of for years. I had an elder brother who never let it be forgotten that they need to find me, One of the other things my brother Nick did is he brought me to a stepfather that I didn't know I had. My mother had remarried years later, after going through several years of troubles after we were taken away. This man kind of picked her up and cleaned her up and gave her a lot of unconditional love and support and helped her heal.
Right.
And lived with her for 20 years until she passed away. And he told me that she never gave up with the hope that she would find me. I was the last child to, like most of them, were able to find their way back when they became adults.
Right.
20s,
Wow.
mid-20s at the latest. And here it was 25 years after that, 25 to 30 years after that, and I was still missing. But to her dying day, she never forgot me. She never let her husband forget that there's another one out there that she doesn't know.
That's beautiful. We need to stop here, but thank you for sharing your powerful story with us. And may the second half of your life have just a lot of joy and love in it.
Well, thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. And to our audience, stay tuned. I'll be right back.
Vancouver Co-op Radio is a unique non-profit radio station that produces creative and engaging programming for voices often ignored by mainstream media. We rely on the financial support of listeners like you to help us continue to produce innovative and hyper-local radio shows and podcasts. Please consider donating online at coopradio.org/donate or by calling 604-684-8494. That's 604-684-8494. Thank you for supporting Vancouver Co-op Radio, your community radio and podcast station.
So that's our show for this week here on Vancouver Co-op Radio, 100.5 FM. We were graced by the music of Cheryl Bear, a First Nations artist here in BC. Thanks to my friend Anthony for sharing his incredible story, and to Don for being a great co-host. And a shout out to our new soundboard operator, Allison. If you have questions or feedback about this program or want to share your story, or have something to say to us, we want to hear from you. You can reach us by email, bothsidesnow@coapradio.org, or via Twitter @BothSidesNowBC. This is Bernadine Fox. We'll be back next week. Until then.
I can't seem to find my way under or over or through. Just when I'm ready to give up the fight, there you are when we turn out the lights. And it's alright, it's alright. Don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Yeah. Why don't I wonder how you know? Well, surely you don't have all of the facts. You could be just making it up. Why don't I ever think of that? It's some kind of